As we arrive at Psalm 25 in our personal ponderings in the Psalms, I want to take the opportunity, as I sometimes do from time to time, to remind you these are not meant to be detailed expositions of any of the Psalms. They're just meant to be devotional, heart-to-heart reflections, drawing out some of the key themes and ideas in the Psalms, trying to show you where the structure of the Psalm is, because that helps you get more out of it. And that's particularly helpful, I think, when we come to Psalm 25, because there is no clear, discernible structure in the normal sense that I've pointed out in some of the other Psalms. But there's another way in which we can understand the meaning and application of this Psalm. Sometimes when you're in the Psalms, you need to look for repetition, especially the repetition that bookends or frames a Psalm. And that's what's true here in Psalm 25. And I think to miss this is to miss what this Psalm is about. I want you to notice that twice he prays the same prayer. Once in verse 2, let me not be put to shame. And then exactly the same again in verse 20, let me not be put to shame. In verse 2, it's prefaced with a statement of confidence in God. And in verse 20, it's followed by a statement of confidence in God. So the clue to understanding Psalm 25 is that this is a prayer from David, that God will not let him be put to shame, but it's based on the confidence in his knowledge of the character of God and his dealings with him that we'll just touch on in a moment. But we need to take a moment to make sure we understand what he means by let me not be put to shame. Because the Hebrew writer, and David used it, that word shame, in a different way from which we use it. We tend to use it in terms of embarrassment because we failed or made a fool of ourselves. But for the psalmist, the idea of shame here is that of not being let down, not being disappointed, not being found that we had put all our eggs in the wrong basket, as it were, put our confidence in the wrong place. It's the same thought that Paul takes up twice, Romans 9 and Romans 10, when he draws from Isaiah 68, I think it is, when he says, whoever believes in him will not be put to shame, will not be mortally embarrassed one day to discover that we got it all wrong, we placed our confidence in the wrong person. I think the Authorized Version puts it, will not make haste, will not panic, will not suddenly discover the moment of need that they had trusted in the wrong thing. So David is saying here, let me not be put to shame, let me not be let down, let me not be disappointed, let me not be found out that I had made the wrong choice, because I've got confidence in you, O God. Now here's the thing I want you to notice about this psalm. This psalm is a wonderful theological statement about God. Martin Luther said the Psalms are the summary of the whole Bible. And if you had no New Testament, which of course is an unthinkable idea, you would still have an amazingly full knowledge and theology of God just from the Psalms. And look what we have in Psalm 25. I've made a list of 10 attributes of God that David points to in this psalm. Verse 3, he's the faithful God, because you're never put to shame if you trust in him. He's the true God because his paths are true. In verse 5, he's the God of salvation. In verse 6, he's the God of mercy. He doesn't deal with us according to what we deserve. In verse 6, he's a God of steadfast or covenant love. In verse 8, he's good and upright. In verse 11, he's forgiving. In verse 14, he's relational. In verse 16, he's gracious. In verses 15 and 20, he's powerful to rescue and deliver. What a glorious God. That's the ground of David's confidence. God, in you, in this God, I put my confidence. Therefore, let me not be put to shame. When my enemies attack me and I stand my ground, let me not be put to shame. Don't let me down. Don't disappoint me. He's not keeping his fingers crossed that God won't. It's a statement of certainty that he won't. And then so you have these wonderful attributes of God, but then you have a psalm that is shot through with prayer requests. I count about 20 or 21 specific prayer requests in this psalm. So you get this mixture of confidence in God and then this constant prayers to God based on the confidence in the character of God. And let me sum up all those prayers in two headings. Number one, there's a prayer that God would lead him in the ways and paths of truthfulness. And secondly, there's the prayer that God would deliver him from his enemies. And sorry, there's a third one. And there's a prayer for forgiveness for his sins. Notice in verse 7, in verse 11, in verse 18, pardon my guilt, forgive my sin. Here's a psalmist, David, who's probably an old, mature, experienced believer, but he never gets to a point where he doesn't have to pray for forgiveness. But his forgiveness, his prayer for forgiveness, is based on the same confidence as his prayer that he won't be put to shame, because he knows his God, and his God is by nature a pardoning God and a forgiving God. What a great God. The Lord bless you.